For those that don't know, I'm Ray Walker with AT&T. I do want to, I guess this first part is self-serving because I get to thank our sponsors, and one of our sponsors is AT&T, as well as Wind Creek Hospitality. Thank you for all you do, and also National Energy as being, Wind Creek being a presenting sponsor and National Energy being a gold sponsor. So we thank you for making this weekend, or these 2 days possible and everything we do. Hope you've enjoyed your time here yesterday and today. The courtyard yesterday, we had great weather. The rain, thank you, Mayor, the rain held off until after we cleaned everything up, so this was good. And then a good dinner last night, and I will finish up this morning with with some speakers here at breakfast, and then trip over to Capitol here this afternoon. But I want to introduce our first speaker. He gets to welcome us to his fair city because it's the mayor of Tallahassee. Mayor John Dailey has come in and is doing a great job here in the city. He's served as a county commissioner previously, but he's doing a great job now that he's come on board and leading the city here in Tallahassee. He has a great relationship. He's also a Leadership Florida alumni, which I'm always going to mention that when I'm around somebody that's alumni. So we both have been through that program, great program that it is. And without any further ado, Mayor, it's all yours.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? This is worse than my Presbyterian church. Everybody's sitting in the back. Feel free to move up if you want to, that's for sure. My name's John Dailey. I'm the proud mayor of the great city of Tallahassee. Let me welcome you here today. First of all, where are my friends from Tallahassee? Anybody from Tallahassee? Yeah? Well, Todd, you don't live here anymore, but you're from Tallahassee, absolutely. All right, so everybody is from outside of Tallahassee that's here. Excellent. So look, wherever you are from, you have a county commission and chairman, you have a city commission and a mayor, but you're all Floridians, okay? This is your capital city. I'm your capital city mayor. So anytime you're in Tallahassee, if there's anything that we can ever do to make your stay more effective or more enjoyable, do not hesitate to ask. We take great pride in our hospitality. We take great pride in the fact that we're the capital city and we like to roll out the red carpet. And in fact, let me just start. Now, what I would like to do is tell you a little bit about Tallahassee, bring you up to speed, and tell you what's going on in the business world, because it will blow your mind when you hear what we have going on here. First of all, I do have to recognize Todd Thompson that's here, and I'm going to embarrass him because we actually grew up together. He is one of the best point guards ever to come out of our high school. Now, it should tell you something, though, that I was the center, so we didn't win many games. You know, there's only about an inch difference between the point guard and the center, but and you might have a year or two on me. So, but it's great to see you, man. Welcome back to Tallahassee and everything. So, folks, if you think about it, what you all are doing, okay, coming, lobby days, spending time with the legislature. This is a tradition that's been going on in the Red Hills of North Florida for literally tens of thousands of years. So if you think about it, the first settlers, the Native Americans, this was the seat of government. I mean, literally within the tribe itself, people would come from all areas to lobby on quality of life issues. Tens of thousands of years. And for 196 years, we've either been the capital of the territory of La Florida, or we've been the capital city of the great state of Florida. So we take great pride in being the capital seat, all right, of the state government, and what you do to come and to lobby to make your lives and the lives of Floridians all across the Panhandle and across the state of Florida for that much better. We've got a lot of great things going on in Tallahassee. So let me remind you all, okay? We are a population of 195,000. We're actually the 7th largest city in the state of Florida, right? But we also take great pride that we stop and say hi to each other on the sidewalk. We have that South Georgia feel, like much of our communities, or South Alabama feel, but yet we are a large city in the state of Florida, 7th out of 412. What also makes our area very unique is we only have one municipality in Leon County. So truly, when you take in the county population of 300,000 total, there's only 12 of us, 5 on the city commission, 7 on the county commission, which is really good, or at times could be really bad, because you have a small group of people that are making large decisions on behalf of an entire 300,000 population. But I'm here to tell you, we got a lot of great things going on in Tallahassee. Let me just run down a couple because, and I apologize, this weather change has got me a little bit. The county's in charge today. It's raining. I'm sorry about that. We'll try to work on it. But bear with me because I do have a little bit of the tickle. So we just had our quarterly budget update at the city of Tallahassee. We had a workshop last week. Like most communities, we check in with our economic development folks to make sure that we're on track and we're moving forward. And let's face it, Tallahassee for the past 2 decades probably hasn't been known as a beehive of economic activity. We've always been so dependent on the state and the university system, which we are very, very, very blessed to have here in our backyard. But as the new mayor of Tallahassee, I've been in for about a year now, my concentration is to expand our economic footprint. Tallahassee's open for business, and we are knocking it out of the park. So if you think about it, all of our economic indicators, we are heading in the right direction. Every single one of our economic indicators are heading in the right direction. In fact, our unemployment rate is at 2.9%, below both the state and the national level, if you think about it. Our taxable sales value is humming at 8%, twice as fast as the state. And in fact, we have the fastest growing economy per capita of any municipality in the state of Florida. Let me say that again. We have the fastest growing economy per capita of any municipality in the state of Florida. And we're starting to draw attention. For the first time in about 10 years, we just attracted a major business, MetroNet, come to Tallahassee. They're doing a $100 million capital investment. They're a fiber company. They see the potential in Tallahassee. We are the first stop in not only the state of Florida, but in the southeastern United States. Now, how does this impact you all? They're coming to Tallahassee to set up shop, and they're looking for other areas to expand. So if you have communities that are looking forward to expanding your fiber presence, let us know. We'd love to be great community partners. And let me pause right here with a quick message. There's one thing that you'll always hear me say. What's good for the region is good for Tallahassee. And what's good for Tallahassee is good for the region. And I was actually telling Todd earlier, the mayor of Pensacola, Grover, is a really good friend of mine. And Grover and I talk about all the time how, as the bookends of North Florida, we need to do a better job of at least pulling the politicals together, all the electeds together, and really do what y'all are doing, pulling all the business community together to really talk about what we're doing and how we're moving forward. So I do want you to know you've got a great partner in Tallahassee. What is good for the region is good for us. What's good for us is good for the region. And very rarely do we actually compete. We complement each other. Now, I also encourage you to pick up the December issue of Florida Trend magazine if you have not seen it already. They did a complete business expo of Tallahassee in our area, and it'll blow your socks away. It really will. Tallahassee's been recognized as the most educated community per capita in the state of Florida, one of the top most educated communities in the United States. What does that mean? Well, with 2 universities and community college, we've got a built-in workforce, graduated, hungry for jobs. So I realize it is my responsibility to attract new businesses and to support the local businesses that we have here so that students that graduate that want to stay in Tallahassee have the opportunity to stay in Tallahassee. Because look, I'm a big fan of Richard Florida. Anybody read Richard Florida's book, Rise of the Creative Class? He's done a lot of studies, especially on millennial generation, talking about that most students nowadays will graduate and pick where they want to live first and then find a job. They're going to pick where they want to live first and then find the job. So as mayor, I got to make Tallahassee really cool. I got to bring in the arts, the culture, the sports. Go Noles. Who went to the ball game last night? Anybody? Nobody went to the FSU ball game last night. We beat Louisville in basketball, #1 in the ACC. We're tearing it up. FAMU's undefeated, by the way, in basketball as well. We're doing well. But you have to understand that we have got to create a cool community. At the same time, we have got to aggressively attract new businesses to Tallahassee and support our local business community. We've also got this really cool thing going on in Tallahassee that maybe you're seeing as well with our entrepreneurial ecosystem. We've got a lot of talent coming out of Florida State, FAMU, and TCC that have decided they want to start their own businesses instead of go and work for somebody else. They want to stay in Tallahassee and start their own businesses. So in fact, if you look at the past 18 months alone in Tallahassee, we've added 175 startups to our ecosystem here. 175. The largest segment being minority women-owned businesses. We have got this really cool startup community that is complementing the already existing business community while we are aggressively attracting new businesses to our community. It's putting us on the national spotlight. On top of that, we've got Southern Living Magazine that named us one of the top 10 cities in the South to live. We've been recognized nationally as one of the best places to start a business and to start over with a business career. We're starting to be recognized, and we're trying to get our story out, which by far has been our greatest hurdle for the past decade. Tallahassee, nobody's really known what's been going on in Tallahassee, and that's about to change. So I'm here to tell you that Tallahassee's got it going on. Our economy is humming. We're doing really well. We're aggressively attracting new businesses to our community, and you're going to see a lot of growth. You see it already. We've got a $150, $200 million project. You see the cranes down at Cascades Park. That's a new AC Marriott that's going in. It's also going to build apartments, condos, mixed-use retail on the first floor. It's going to be a boom to our local economy, especially in downtown Tallahassee. You see the cranes just on the other side of Washington Square. That's a Lowe's hotel that's coming in as well. Actually, right now, I think we're putting up between nine or 10 new hotels in Tallahassee. We got a Hotel Indigo going up down in the College Town area. You're seeing a lot of construction. Up at I-10, we've got 2 new hotels going up there as well. Complete redevelopment of the REI. Let me close by saying a couple of things that we're doing, and then if we have time, I'll be more happy to answer any questions. 2 major focuses that we have in Tallahassee right now. So, Todd, you are familiar with the old Tallahassee Northwood Mall. It's 37 acres. It's about a mile up the road on Monroe Street, okay? Basically in the heart of downtown Tallahassee. Last year, I was driving to work several days, and all of a sudden the for sale sign goes up. Now, this is the mall that Todd and I grew up. It used to be the movie theater there. The library was there. I mean, if you're from Tallahassee, it's got a lot of good memories. But like in most of our communities, malls are struggling, right? So all of a sudden it goes up and it's for sale. And then I start following it, and it goes into receivership. And then about 2 weeks later, they announced they're going to have a public auction. So I went to the city manager, and I said, you know what? We don't usually do this, but we should get in the auction. We should purchase it. We should lead the redevelopment area, because I'm a true believer. If you own the dirt, you control the destiny, right? With the end goal, obviously, to turn it back over onto the private property hands and bring in the taxable value and be able to enhance the community. So 5 years ago, this piece of property sold for $50 million, 37 acres right in the heart, already zoned activity center. You could do anything. It's 100% impervious. We bought it for $6.8 million, $2 million below the appraised value. We are in the process right now of master planning out this piece of property, 37 acres in the heart of Tallahassee. It is going to transform North Monroe Street. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And I think history is going to look back on the city of Tallahassee actually entering, getting involved, competing, leading the redevelopment efforts, turning it back over to the private sector, and you're going to see some amazing things. Out of the 37 acres, we are going to take about 7 of those acres, and we're going to build a state-of-the-art police station, something that is desperately needed here in Tallahassee. Then we're going to take the old police station in Midtown on 7th Avenue, and we're going to tear it down, and we're going to completely redevelop it as well. And it's got a connection between Lake Ella in our Midtown area, which is this really cool area that has grown organically over the past decade. We also have a fairgrounds, 100 acres, about a mile on South Monroe Street, that the other day I threw out the idea and I said, you know what? It's time to talk on a regional level with our partners in North Florida and relocate the North Florida Fairgrounds. Because if you look at the history of fairgrounds, we do not have the agribusiness that supports a fairgrounds, okay? We have a fair that comes to town, we have some gun shows, we have some car shows, boat shows, but it's not truly fulfilling the promise of what a fairgrounds is. We also have the opportunity to redevelop 100 acres on the south side of Tallahassee, which is desperately needed. So you're going to be seeing us move forward. But the most exciting thing going on in Tallahassee right now is our airport. See, Tallahassee is unique because we own all the utilities. We own the electric. By the way, our municipal electric rates are the lowest in the state of Florida, and compared against FP&L and all the private industry, we're the 4th lowest. We have the lowest tax rate in our municipal cost comparison with other municipalities as large as Orlando and as small as Largo. The message there is it actually is extremely affordable to live in Tallahassee. Our tax base is low. Our fees are low, and the cost of doing business, we have no business tax in Tallahassee. We got rid of that. We have no impact fees in Tallahassee. Cost of doing business in Tallahassee is very affordable as well. But we have this unique opportunity because we own the airport. We own all of our utilities. We own all the land around the airport. We've got about 600 acres of raw land that's just busting to be developed. Matter of fact, I was telling Todd and a couple of y'all that I just took a delegation over to Pensacola. See the amazing work that's going on at their airport with the MRO industry and how y'all are about to launch another 200,000 square foot facility, I believe, something like that. We could do that here in Tallahassee. Again, not competing, but complementing. The more MROs that we can bring in the industry to North Florida, the better we all are doing, literally from Mobile all the way over. So you're going to see Tallahassee aggressively moving forward. What does that look like? We've already put together a working group of local professionals that are in the industry, dirt attorneys down to commercial developers, engineers, everything in between, where we're going through and we're doing a tabletop exercise, trying to work out all the hurdles to make sure that we are pad ready and ready to rock and roll. And you're going to see us aggressively recruiting to Tallahassee so that we can start building. And we're ready. We've identified our capital. Again, we own all the assets. And we're ready to rock and roll. So you're going to see a lot of cool things coming out of Tallahassee, literally between now and, say, 10 years from now, this complete transformation of our business community, and it's really exciting. So with that, let me say, does anybody have any questions about what's going on in Tallahassee or any questions in general? Oh, was that good? Anything? Seeing none, thank you all. Thanks for having me this morning. Thanks for the cup of coffee. I appreciate it. Enjoy your time in Tallahassee, and if there's anything that we could do, just let us know, okay? Thank you. Good man. Thank you.
Having spent a lot of time in Tallahassee for work, it was always referred, Tallahassee for years was just universities and government.
That's right.
And that tone's changing. It's changing. It's great to see. It's very positive. Report here from Tallahassee. This time I get to introduce our district secretary for FDOT, Florida DOT, Phillip Gaynor. He spent over 33 years in the industry, both private and with the state. If I read it correctly, I think probably the most unique thing I read about him when I was looking at this is you're a pastor as well. So on your free time, okay, I'm not sure how you pull that off because I know how much you work with the FDOT, so that's might be the greatest challenge you have going for you. Besides keeping our roads up and running so we can get to and from work all across the Panhandle and District 3. And with that, Mr. Gaynor, it's all yours.
Thank you. Pastor, is everybody sitting back of your church?
Yes, they do. But I had a real creative individual that said, "Okay, preacher, where's the front door?" And I said, "Well, it's right back there." She said, "I'm sitting in the front." So I said, "Okay, here's what you need to know. I don't talk to the people on the front pews. I talk to the ones on the back pews. That's what we do." So we have it that way. So, but I appreciate this opportunity to speak, and I'm glad he told you that I was a preacher because I'm a wanderer. I've got to stay near the mic and see if I can stay with there. But let me give you a little bit first about me and a lot of folks, my dad worked for DOT. A lot of folks don't know he actually retired from DOT with 32 years. We spent originally, I'm originally from Chipley. And then we moved to Apalachicola where he built the first St. George Island Bridge. And then from there we moved to Fort Walton, which he worked on the bridges over that way as an inspector. And then we moved, when I was in kindergarten, we moved to Tallahassee. And from there, I went to school through the 6th grade. Fairview was the one I went. And then we moved to Crawfordville. And I graduated from Wakulla High School. And then I went to TCC. And then, much to some of you's dismay, I ended up at the University of Florida for an engineering degree. And then I went back. I came all the way back to Chipley. And we've been there, my wife and I. She's originally from Gainesville. We tell everybody I had to go to Gainesville to get married because I'm related to everybody back that way. And we got to make sure we're not. And yes, I am related to Senator Gaynor. You cannot pick your relatives, okay? And I've asked him time and time again, will you please quit telling people how good I am? Because you're writing checks that I cannot cash. And we have an opportunity for that. But as far as the area and where we are, we mentioned millennials. And that was one of the things we kind of talked about yesterday in my office. We had somebody write me a letter from a real estate company, and they want me to look at buying an easement or doing some different things. And she said the easement was identified ages ago. And I asked my wife when I got home last night, what do you consider ages ago? This young lady considered it 2003. Wow. That made me feel really old. But I have been in this for basically 32 years. My dad, like I say, before I was ever born, he worked for DOT, retired there, and my wife and I, we have 5 kids. They're all grown. 29's the oldest, 19's the youngest. They still live around Chipley. They are blessed by the DOT because every drop of food they've ever had has been a direct related to our work for DOT and what we do. But also, I have to tell this because I'm a proud granddaddy. I got 5 grandchildren, and I had 4 boys, and the youngest one's a girl. Just had her 2 weeks ago, and my daughter she's the one that brought the first girl. The boys are okay, but I'm gonna tell you, there's something about those little girls that's special. But I tell you all that to tell you this. Here's what you need to know. District 3 is 16 counties wide. We go from Jefferson County to Escambia County, and we have a lot of things happening in those areas. And we've kind of come to the point where we try not to speak so much about what happened about a year and a half ago, but I'll mention to you just kind of briefly where we are. Y'all know Hurricane Michael came, and for my area, it's devastating. And for y'all's as well, I'm very aware the things that happened and what we did. But because of some decisions made by the governors at that time and some things we did, we assumed a lot of the smaller counties' debris removal contracts. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want you to get a good idea of the magnitude of what we did. Whenever we paid all the bills for the counties that of economic concern, and as well as our bills and also the ones on interstate for the debris removal, we basically are at $450 million worth of debris. Now, if you don't believe that's a lot of trees, that's a lot of trees. And I tell this story. We look to projects and we look to see things. And I asked my own people one day in a staff meeting, I said, what's the biggest project that we've ever had in District 3? And we say the Pensacola Bay Bridge, and it is. $450 million thereabout, and it's very large, it's gonna take 5 years. Well, we did $400 million in 9 months. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, we have to keep up with every load and every ticket, and we have to print them and deliver them. So we're working very hard on that, and at the same time, we're still doing all the work that we have been doing. We're still doing all the things on the interstate. An interesting fact, we had 87 miles of fence we had to replace. We're still replacing it, by the way. We had about 1,500 signs that we had to replace, and the shops can't keep up with it. So we have our own sign shop, DOT. We're working those as well. And we have just tremendous amount of efforts going on out there, and at the same time, we're trying to provide the same system that we have and provide the things we do. Because what we're looking for, a few years ago, we had a secretary that made the decision, or not the decision, when worked with the governor. We are an economic driver at the Department of Transportation. If you look at our 5-year work program as what we use to develop, we go for 5 years. District 3's 5-year work program is $3.4 billion. That's a lot of money here. And if you go to Alabama or Mississippi, some of their entire state is not even half that much. And so what we look for in the things we do, we try to make sure that we are spending our money in the right direction. First and foremost is safety. That's the governor's directive. That's our directive. We know we are addressing issues and we're trying to and move through them. And safety is a number one because we have a lot of people that's going up and down our roads. But I'm going to tell you something. I tell the young folks that come into our office that the new employees and those kind of things like that, I said, let me tell you what you do. What you do is very important because you and your family use the product that we build. And like I say, I have a boy and 4 girls, and they drive on the roads we built. I drive across bridges my daddy built. And we've got these things that are out there, and what we do is very important, not just because of the public, but we're part of it, and we want to give, and we want to make sure we do the things we should and make sure we keep up with it. But safety is our number one. Preserving our roads and preserving the amount of money that we've got invested at this point in time in our system. Things seem to be getting higher and more expensive. We work on asphalt with tremendous amount of resurfacing going on, and we have a lot of other areas that we deal with, and we deal with a lot of local governments and those folks like that we have. We deal absolutely with the TPOs and MPOs and the chambers as well and the folks that's part of that. And I'm going to tell you that without the partnerships of the local governments, without the partnerships of the TPOs in these areas, we could not do our job. Without those partnerships, it would be very difficult for us to even set a budget because we have to go through the TPO. We have those ideas are out there. And we're dealing with safety. We have some areas where people think that we can just turn a switch and things will be fixed. It's not that easy, but we are trying to move more and more through it, and we work with that. But I'm telling you, from our perspective, from the department's perspective, if it wasn't for the local government partnerships, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. But we also talked, just before we came in here, talking to Chris, and we were saying, if you look at District 3 map and you identify the military bases that are there, we have a very large amount of military. About 6 months ago, I had a county commissioner call, and I won't tell you where it was or who it was. A county commissioner called and he said, Phillip, you got to get Eglin to quit closing the road during the day. I said, sir, they own that road. And I'm grateful that they allow us to go through there as much as we do. So no, I'm not going to get them to stop. And it's mission critical. So we have to step back and work in those areas, and those partnerships with the Tyndall Air Force Base that we've got going on right now, where we have the single point urban interchange we're putting in. And we had that project before the storm, and it continued after the storm because we want to support the military. And because of that and some of the things we're doing, things are coming back. So we're looking at that with those partnerships, not just with the local governments, but also with the military and the different folks we deal with. One of the things, I'll go back real quick, one of the things that very interesting for me, and I know we have representatives here, and I appreciate him being here, because it made me change my note that I was going to talk about, but this time of year, we have a lot of visitors in Tallahassee, a lot. And as a state agency that we are, those visitors pretty much control our budgets. So we try to make them all happy. And it's not very successful sometimes. But we do the best we can, and we have the support, and we know that's here. But with the Capitol being here and the legislature being in session, we look at a lot of different things we can do to help. But we always want to be available. We always want to be available to them, to you, to wherever we can, to be that economic driver and be a part of the team. One quick thing you need to know as well, autonomous vehicles, that's coming. The more we go to these AV and CAV meetings and things, that's coming. And it's going to be so important that our infrastructure is up to date and available for them. And Carter and I were talking on the way over this way. I said, you know, Carter, we have the camera system, what we call the Rural Traffic Management Center, that goes from Tallahassee all the way to Alabama line. And Greg Evans, District 2 Secretary, he's coming from that direction. So we're going to have all of I-10 under camera. Now, we don't record. We don't record. But what we do, these cameras have sensors on it, Bluetooth and those kind of things like that. And as a car comes through, or a vehicle comes through, it just sees what the distance is, or how you make it from one sensor to another. And that's the way we get our speed feedback. That we, you know, if it says the next 13 miles takes 10 minutes or whatever, that's because it's average speed coming off the sensors that we have. And we know what it's there. Again, we don't record, we don't know who they are, we don't know that kind of stuff like that. But let me tell you, if a car slows down, and if there's a group that slows down, they're doing 20 mile an hour because of a wreck or something along those lines, it actually notifies the people who runs the TMC to pull the camera up and look and see if there's something out there, so we can get real-time information on those boards and move forward with it. And I warn my folks all along, don't stop with a DOT car on the side of the road, because the camera's going to look. If you got to go to the bathroom, we got rest areas, so don't stop on the side of the road. But these things happen, and we see it, and this investment is probably the early stages of what we would call a CAV, or an opportunity to move forward with that. I will tell you this, Carter's going to shoot me for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm old school. I'm not a millennial. I have 5 children who are, and they teach me every day that I don't know anything about the younger generation. But the first time they come out with automated vehicle, I said, you know what, Carter, I have already got that. I've got a horse that if you turn the reins, he's going to take you back to the barn every time. He'll get you home. And I was reminded that's not what we're talking about. But you see these things out there, and we must continue to look at our infrastructure, stay ahead, because it's coming faster than we are. And one of the things that's, I guess, kind of difficult for us to understand with the department, We're not the driver of that. No pun intended with a car. We're not the driver. The car manufacturing companies are the ones that's doing it. And we need to make sure we have the things available to them. We're not going to sit and tell them what they can do or can't do. We've got to make sure we respond. And we've got the support from the legislature, we've got support from the governor to move forward in that. Even in North Florida, we're looking, like I say, at some of these opportunities for us to see through the cameras and the TMCs and those kind of things like that. Whenever you actually look at it, the Road Ranger program comes from that TMC. We also, like I say, our cameras, we have faster response now on time to get folks to there if there's an accident. And there's also, we see the cues, and we've got a partnership with the Highway Patrol to do everything we can to get them out of the road as quickly as we can, so that whenever we can not have what we call our secondary crashes. You get a 2-mile backup on the interstate, folks are not paying attention. And the things that come up, they'll actually, we had an accident about 6 months ago that the original accident was a fender bender. 2 accidents later, the second one of that was a fatality because it was a secondary crash. So we're doing everything we can safety-wise to get it through, and it's using that same technology we have to monitor the speeds and those kind of things. I also indicated that public involvement, very important. You all are probably more aware than I am that social media is, a lot of people consider that public involvement. I would rather talk to somebody than have to read it on the, and these change.orgs. Yes. I got 140 emails in just no time. And you know, we have to look at trying to answer them all. That's very difficult. But if you could just speak and tell them, look, this is what we're doing. And we have had some situations where we had some very unfortunate accidents and things that occurred. And whenever we meet with a local entity to try to figure out what to do, unfortunately, a lot of time it's distracted drivers. And we always talk about the 3 E's: engineering, education, and enforcement. Engineering, we feel like we're doing pretty good with what we have. There are some areas we can improve and do something a little better. But the education and the enforcement has got to come hand in hand. Because whenever you have somebody who is distracted, who happened to cause a fatality or a wreck or something like those lines, it's hard for us to step up and say, this is what you need to do, because it's enforcement and it's education. And we're doing everything we can to be good partners with FHP and the local entities when these things come up. So we're trying, we strive, we want to make sure what we do is acceptable, but we also have a job to do. And as the Department of Transportation, we sometimes make decisions that are not always acceptable to the local entities. And we try our best to work through those. We exhaust every yes before we try to say no. And we try to figure out if there is a no, this is what we're going to do around it. So we're very aware of the impact that we have as a state agency, but specifically in District 3. We're very aware that if we don't keep the infrastructure up and going, then the problem, it impacts what y'all do, it impacts the folks you represent, and it impacts our area. So we do everything we can to keep it safe, to preserve it, but also increase mobility in the future. So that's some of the things we're looking at. We're trying to, in District 3, we've always made the statement, it's where thousands live and millions want to. We actually can build our way out of congestion. Some of the districts down the state have more difficulty with that. They have to look at transit and other opportunities, but we have the room that we can expand and keep things going. So with that being said, I do appreciate the opportunity to be here today. The secretary, I think he was asked to come speak, and he said, I got somebody perfect for you. And I got volunteered, but I want you to know I appreciate it, because it got Carter out pretty early coming over this way driving for me while I was looking at my notes. So Carter lives around Panama City Beach. I live just south of Chipley, and we've enjoyed the areas that we've had, and like I say, the things we do. This area is ours all the way over to Pensacola, and we enjoy the opportunities to be there. But if there's any questions, I don't know how long I was supposed to go, but yes, ma'am.
Are there plans to rebuild that rest area in Jackson County?
Yes, ma'am. It's actually went out to contract twice. We bid it twice to try to move in that direction, and we were waiting with some of these other areas. We're absolutely going to redo that one, but we're also looking, we're going to get it open, and then we're going to go back and look to see what we can do for enhancements like we did the one in Leon County and Jefferson County. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And having worked with Carter for many years, getting him up early and getting him over here, that's a challenge in itself right there. So I commend you for that. We need to move right along. Our next speaker has ties to Northwest Florida and goes way back with family. He's also a Leadership Florida alum as myself, and he's works for, he's a lobbyist for Gray Robinson, and without any further ado, we're going to keep things moving because we're already behind time, so I'm not going to read a long introduction. Chris Dawson is here with us from Gray Robinson. I'm turning it over to you.
All right, good morning, everyone. As Ray said, I do have ties to Northwest Florida. I'm a Pace High graduate, 2005, so 2003 was eons ago to me as well, sorry. My family's been in Northwest Florida for 6 generations. My uncle was Senator Evers, who of course was in the legislature, and so that's how I got my start in politics, hauling campaign signs from Escambia County over even to Holmes County at once upon a time when the districts ran east and west, not north and south. So Northwest Florida is in my blood. I now reside in Orlando, unfortunately, but I still get to come home. And it's been a great joy of mine to get involved with the Chamber, and Todd and his team have done a fantastic job on this first Northwest Florida Days, and we certainly look forward to seeing this tradition grow. Real quick, before I jump into a little bit of just what's going on in Tallahassee, what's going on this week, the Secretary made reference, but I do want to introduce Representative Alex Andrade in the back. Y'all probably know him from back home. The youngest male in the Florida legislature. He's got a couple really sharp young ladies that got him beat on the youngest title. Alex and I went to college together at the University of Florida, so I've known him a long time. If you want the real dirt, I'll see you at the cocktail party later on, and we'll talk about some of those stories, but we won't do it here publicly. Alex is doing a great job and really representing Northwest Florida very well. So, as a contract lobbyist, I am involved in all types of policy and all types of budget all over the Capitol. I get a little more freedom to speak freely about the politics of what's going on. Is there any press in the room? Let me see how freely I get to speak. All right, we should be good. I'll try to give you all a little bit of the inside dirt then. We're in week 7, and so we have 2 more weeks to go in this legislative session. Of course, 60 days every year, unless they go to overtime, which they've done a couple times in the last few years, but I don't think we're at risk of doing that this year. I'll put a little poll out to the group this morning to get everybody lively. Any guesses on how many bills have passed the legislature and been signed by the governor at this point? I hear none. One is the right answer. We've had 1 bill pass this legislative session. It did get signed. I think it got signed on Monday. That bill essentially prohibits homeowners associations from passing regulations that don't allow first responders and law enforcement to park their vehicles at their home. That's probably not a problem in Northwest Florida, but as someone who resides a little further south in the state, there's some crazy folks. And so that was a good bill that was signed into law by our governor. Of course, there's only 1 bill that's required every legislative session, and that is the budget. They're constitutionally required to pass a balanced budget. We haven't gotten that bill yet, but it's forthcoming, and I'll talk a little bit about that one as well. But first, I just want to jump into some of the high-level issues, the big policy issues that are going on and that are discussions there across the street. Of course, healthcare deregulation has been a priority of this speaker, and he is looking to cement that legacy this year, most notably looking at scope of practice for nurse practitioners. And so the House has already passed a measure, the Senate is taking it up, and it's moving through the process to grant greater powers, greater autonomy and independence to nurse practitioners, really looking to drive down the cost of healthcare, drive up availability. Water policy continues to be a big one. Of course, We're familiar in Northwest Florida following the BP oil spill and all of the issues related to water and how that can affect your main economic drivers, tourism, and things like that. And then we all remember a couple summers ago the green algae blooms down in South Florida and the impacts that those had. So the governor came in, he promised to make environmental issues and water funding a priority. The legislature has risen to that occasion as well. And so again, we will have at least $650 million dedicated to water quality and water restoration projects in this year's budget. Everyone is on the same page. Where folks are not on the same page is teacher pay. And you've likely seen there are several proposals that have been going around, all aiming at increasing teacher pay. Of course, the governor put in his budget almost a $900 million program. $600 million of that would go to increasing the starting pay from its current levels that fluctuate across the state. We would have a set rate of $47,500 per teacher for starting pay. That would make Florida the third highest state in the nation for starting teacher pay. That proposal ran into, I think, some of the realities of district autonomy, local millage rates, local fluctuations in teacher pay, and the fact that it only focused on starting salaries. And so you have tenured teachers, you have non-instructional personnel, you have paraprofessionals that are all part of the game, they're all on the team. And so we got to find a way to get those folks as part of the rising tide. So I think you will see a proposal get across the finish line this year to address teacher pay. I think it'll capture some of those other groups, so it probably won't get to the full 47.5, but I think we will see some type of across-the-board effort to pay our teachers and our professionals more. University higher ed issues. If you've been following the news lately, there was a surprise bill that dropped, an amendment to a bill that dropped on Friday of last week that would consolidate the state university system from 12 into 10, or down to 10. It would take the Florida Polytechnic University in Polk County and fold that into the University of Florida. And then the most recent iteration of the bill would also take New College in Sarasota and fold that into the University of Florida. It was an amendment that was kind of just posted in the middle of the night, and so everyone woke up Friday morning and said, this is something we got to discuss. There's been some momentum getting behind at least the idea of consolidation. The why is the legislature and folks have really been digging into the university system and how money is spent, how much money we spend to get graduates into the workforce. And so those two institutions, the two newest, had the highest cost per diploma rate in the state. So it was costing, in some cases, multipliers of what it costs at UF or FSU to get those students graduated with a degree. So that's an issue that's going to be hyper-local. If you have a university in your district, you don't want to see it get closed or folded into another university. So that's going to be a political issue to follow here in the final days of session. Also, in the higher education space, two more pieces. There's a select committee that's been formed to look at the university system, particularly for foreign interference. You might have seen some of the news out of the Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa. There were some Chinese nationals that were involved in research. They were sending the research back to China, stealing the intellectual property. And so the legislature has created this committee to take a holistic look at our state university systems, the research that we're doing, and whether or not our intellectual property is at risk. So that's an interesting one. I think that's a conversation you'll see continue for a couple of years moving forward. And then finally, university funding continues to be a big issue. The Senate has been very proactive in wanting to see greater amounts of money go into the state university system, greater preeminence funding. The House has been the yin to that yang, and they want to see reductions. They want to see cost efficiencies put into the university system. And so as we get into the final days of budget negotiations, that'll continue to be a conversation. Has anyone ever heard of E-Verify? A minor issue going around. So the legislature is currently looking at a couple of proposals to implement the E-Verify system. The governor has called for this. It was one of his campaign promises. It's one of his top priorities this year. And he has called for an across-the-board use of E-Verify, public sector and private sector employers. The legislature currently has two proposals, both of which do apply to public sector and private sector employers. Last week, the Senate version had a carve-out for the agriculture industry. This week, it does not because of some political pressure that was applied. And so those proposals are continuing to work their way through the process. and E-Verify will be an issue in the final days of session. Transportation, I won't beat on this one much. Secretary Gaynor did a fantastic job. We almost take it for granted how great our DOT is here in Florida, and fully funding of the DOT work plan has kind of become the norm, which isn't the case in a lot of places, and that's really driving the growth and economic development in the state. He touched on autonomous vehicles. I would add electric vehicle infrastructure is a big issue. There are proposals in both the House and the Senate to push forward a comprehensive statewide plan on electric vehicle infrastructure. We're also using some of the Volkswagen settlement dollars. If you're familiar with that case, they were overstating their emissions criteria. The state sued, the state settled. We got a pot of money, and some of that is being used on electric vehicle infrastructure. The tax package, that's always a fun and annual tradition, if you will, for the Republican-controlled legislature. We always have a tax reduction package looking to make sure that we're making the most efficient use of your dollars and my dollars here in Tallahassee. So that package has come forward again this year. In the House, it's looking like something in the $100 million, $150 million range. Hearing the Senate will have a more tapered back tax package this year. Potentially even something in the $40 or $50 million range that just kind of keeps those tax holidays we're all accustomed to going. So back to school sales tax holiday, disaster preparedness sales tax holiday. Again, that's a budget issue as well. It's policy and budget, but it gets tied up in the negotiations over the annual budget. I'm going to breeze through a couple more because I know we're trying to get back on time. These all go really quickly on. Vaping ban has become a big issue. You may recall there was a constitutional amendment that ultimately passed that prohibited indoor vaping. The legislature now has several proposals that would ban different types of vaping. And one proposal require the vaping age to be 21. Another proposal would ban certain types of flavored product in the vaping space. That's become a really big sticking point, and not necessarily along partisan lines. It's really more of a personal autonomy issue for some folks. It's a health issue for other folks. So that one's been interesting. The governor weighed in on that one yesterday. And the governor, I think, has consistently, and it's interesting to see how strongly he keeps going towards a local rule type governor. Governor Scott was very much in favor of preemption, very much believing that the state should dictate what cities and counties do on ordinances and things like that. I think that this governor has taken more of a open-minded position towards local regulation on certain issues, and I think this is one that he's going to defer to the locals on. Another one, same issue, or same mindset, if you will, vacation rentals, so the Airbnbs, the VRBOs, there's a patchwork of local regulations on those. The legislature for years now has tried to get a preemption bill in place that would provide uniformity across the state on regulation of vacation rentals. The governor came out yesterday on that one and again said, I think that's an issue that's better left to the local government. So that was an interesting turn of events on that one. Visit Florida will be a big issue again this year. That's a funding issue. It's also a policy issue. The organization is up for its reauthorization. It had been authorized for 8 years. That ran out last year. The legislature couldn't agree on a long-term reauthorization, so we got a 1-year renewal. We got a $50 million budget last year where it had been around $76 million prior. And so the Senate is in favor of keeping Visit Florida. They have a bill that would reauthorize it for another extended period of time. The House has taken the position and in their budget proposal of zeroing out and eliminating Visit Florida. And so that will be a big bargaining chip on the table when we get to budget negotiations. The price tag on that, again, would be another $50 million to keep the organization around for next year. Last two pieces, both dealing with workforce. The governor has made a big priority of deregulation of occupations. You'll likely recall when he first got into office last year, he had an agency-wide, government-wide for all agencies, dereg-a-thon to go through and start cutting red tape. He's highlighted regulations in occupational licensure, qualifications, education requirements, and is looking at a comprehensive culling of that to help people get to work, to take down barriers of entry into the economy. In that vein, also workforce issues continue to be a main priority of the legislature and the governor. Anything from career and technical education to apprenticeships. These types of programs have been widely supported, and so I think you'll see a continued push to drive more availability for students in the K-12 space to go into apprenticeships, to go, become an electrician or a plumber, not just being forced into a college or university pathway. So I think that's good. I mentioned the budget. Again, that's the one bill that they have to pass this year. Both chambers have put forward a budget proposal. We'll be around the $91 billion, $92 billion range this year. And so the big ticket items that go into that are some of the ones I talked about, the water and wastewater projects, Visit Florida dollars. There's always around this time, and you might hear it in the hallways, chatter of a gaming deal. The Seminole Compact, of course, has been an issue that the legislature has looked at renewing for a number of years. I feel like we get to week 7 every year, and there's some mysterious budget deal that's going to come out, and we're going to have a new gaming compact. To be determined whether that happens, though it is a priority of Senate President Bill Galvano to get that across the finish line before his term ends. Just for the budget purposes, a gaming deal to the state is worth between $300 and $400 million per year in general revenue. And so if there's a way to capture those funds, they'd certainly like to, but that runs against some headwinds. The House has been typically or generally opposed to any expansion of gaming, as well as we had a constitutional amendment in 2018 that now requires a voter referendum on any expansion of gaming in the state. And so that complicates a little bit the math on the gaming deal. 2 or 3 more budget issues, and then I'll wrap up or take questions or get us back on time. That's the one. Affordable housing, the Sadowski Trust Fund, this continues to be an issue. A lot of, I think, political momentum around the state to get fully funding of Sadowski, to get more affordable housing dollars at work in the state. We know we have a critical issue with affordable housing in Florida, but the legislature has to appropriate that. So currently, as it stands, the Senate does fully fund Sadowski in their budget proposal. The House funds portions of Sadowski, but they also sweep part of the funding to pay for priorities in other parts of the budget. So again, a chip on the table when we get to the final days of session. The last one I'll mention, and a big one for the Panhandle generally, hurricane recovery continues to be a priority. We all know how terrible of an impact Hurricane Michael had on our friends to the east in the Panhandle. The legislature really stepped up last year. Even when the federal government hadn't appropriated any recovery dollars yet, the state did step up and got that process going. I think you're going to see that continue to be a priority this year. And really the entirety of the Panhandle delegation has been lockstep on that. And so, I was in high school during Hurricane Ivan. We know at some point one's going to come our way. So it's really, as a local and as a Northwest Floridian, it's been great to see the unity from Pensacola to Tallahassee to make sure that our friends in Bay County and Gulf County and Calhoun and Jackson and Washington and Holmes are getting their communities put back together, because it's been really a life-altering experience they had with Hurricane Michael. So with that, I'll wrap up and just say that's a little bit of the highlights of what's going on. There's always a curveball at the end of session, so we're all waiting anxiously to see what that is. But again, thank you all for being here, and for Todd and his team for putting this together. It's a tremendous event. Really would love to see it grow in the future, because in Tallahassee, presence is power, and it would be absolutely great to continue to have that Northwest Florida presence here as our state is looking at what the next 10 years in Florida look like. So I'll tee up our friends at the Chamber on their Florida 2030 plan. Thanks.
And again, moving right along, no long introductions, but we have with us the chairman, let me get it right. Let's see, Executive Vice President for Government and Political Affairs with the Florida Chamber. And so I'm trying to get all that out in once. Mr. David Hart, thank you so much for being here.
Good morning. So Todd, Sarah, thanks so much for the invitation to be with all of you this morning. And let me start by thanking all of you for taking time away from your families, from your businesses to be here. It matters so much that you come and make sure business community's voices are heard during the session, because in your absence, bad things will tend to happen over there. So I'm glad you're here. I'm going to share just quickly a little bit about sort of the state of Florida's economy as we are gathered here this morning. And then Chris actually touched on a lot of the issues that I was going to talk about this morning, and I'll touch on a good bit of them as well, but maybe give you a little bit different vantage point on some of them so you can learn a little bit more about where things stand and what you can do to impact these final 3 weeks of session. So first off, to the economy. Florida's economy is doing really, really well. We have a lot to celebrate as Floridians. So our state GDP, if you hadn't heard this lately, is now $1.2 trillion annually. $1.2 trillion. If we were our own country, Florida would be the 17th largest economy in the world. Oh my gosh, we're outpacing every other state in terms of job creation. And get this, we've built an environment in Florida that is so welcoming to capital, and we all know capital flows where it's most welcome. We now track on the Florida scorecard how much capital is coming into our state, and it's coming in so rapidly we have to track it by the hour. We get $1.19 million of capital every hour of every day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year flowing into our state. Imagine what that's doing to keep our economy growing and jobs being created. Our population's growing again too. I think everybody by now knows we surpassed New York last year to be the third largest state in terms of population, but we're projected to grow by another 4.5 million residents of Florida by 2030. Where are we going to put them? That, by the way, that breaks down to right at 900 new residents a day, every day, for the year 2020. A lot to celebrate at home in Escambia County, for those of you that made your way from Pensacola too. Not only is the state unemployment rate at a record historic low of 3% unemployment, Escambia County's at 2.7% unemployment. It's almost unimaginable. And so I imagine for many of you that are running businesses, what's keeping you up at night is, where on earth am I going to find that next talented employee to fill an open position or expand my company? And by the way, that's true all across the state. When we talk to our members from Key West to Jacksonville to Pensacola, that's the number one thing keeping employers awake at night is, where am I going to find that talent? Hence, a lot of the legislature and the governor's focus on everything to do with higher education, with different degrees, with different programs that can get people, prepared and into the workforce. So one other thing we track at the Florida Chamber through our foundation on the scorecard, if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go to it. You can drill down within the scorecard now, and you can literally look by county at how fast your population is growing, how many jobs you need to create. And I know some of you are from other counties across the Panhandle, but I just happened to pull Escambia this morning. You're going to grow in population. Currently, you're at 315,000 in Escambia County. You're going to grow to 332,000 to 361,000 by 2030. And in order to hold pace with where you are in your unemployment rate, Escambia County's got to create another 17,420 jobs. So you have your work cut out for you. Well, enough about the economy. We can come back to that later if y'all have questions. I'm going to touch on just a couple of issues, and I'll do it by our 6-pillar program. I'll start with talent and education. There's a lot going on in this space this particular session. It was alluded to that the governor has come out very strongly back before session with a pretty significant teacher pay increase. It would make Florida the second highest of all 50 states in terms of minimum teacher pay, and it would set the minimum teacher pay at $47,500. The House and the Senate have both passed their budgets as it relates to teacher pay. They're $150 million apart. The House has $650 million in their plan. Senate has $500 million in their plan, so they differ. But as they begin to move towards conference, and because this is a high priority of the governors, I think you're going to see a coalescence and a pretty good increase in teacher pay for Florida. It was also mentioned that there's a lot going on in higher ed, and that little controversial bill that would fold two of the smaller universities into University of Florida. I'm not going to talk about that, but I actually do want to talk about a different issue related to higher ed, just because I've been interested to poll Floridians as they come through town. Would you do me a favor and raise your hand if you know what ranking Florida's higher education system got for 3 years in a row from U.S. News and World Report? Has anybody? 2 of you? 3? So, number 1. So get this. The number 1 higher ed system in the country 3 years in a row, and like nobody knows it. I'm going to challenge you. We have got to, as Floridians, start bragging better about what we've accomplished here. If it's true that talent is the new driver of economies, meaning jobs and capital are going to move their companies where the talent exists, we're a beacon right now. We should be a flashing, gigantic billboard bragging about this number 1 higher ed system, because that'll just keep the inflow of capital and opportunity coming our way. I'll talk a little bit about economic development, and you're going to hear from our great friend Ken Lawson a little bit from the Department of Economic Opportunity. So I'll save some of this for him, but I want to brag for a moment on some of yours home Representative Mel Ponder. We have absolutely loved working with Mel, and if you know Mel, he stands up for what he believes in, and he filed the bill to reauthorize Visit Florida in the House, where it was not popular with the Speaker, and it hasn't moved, but kudos to him for having the courage to stand up for Visit Florida. And not just the jobs in your communities that are tied to tourism, but the 1.5 million jobs in Florida that are tied to tourism. In the Senate, that bill has moved all the way through the process and off the floor, but it does not look like the House has the appetite to take it up. I think the best we can hope for is what we got last year, which is a 1-year reprieve, sort of reauthorize it for 1 more year, done in the budget process. By the way, on the budget process, I forgot to mention, so both bodies have passed their individual budgets, but they are $1.4 billion apart that has to get reconciled as they go to conference. We think that could happen as early as this weekend, or maybe early next week. The Senate has a much bigger budget in total, $92.4 billion, whereas the House is at $91.4 billion. So they have a pretty big gap to close. Let's see, I wanted to talk a little bit about infrastructure. So last year, the Florida Chamber and our Infrastructure Coalition worked very closely with President Galvano, and that work behind the scenes led to the Senate President and the Senate's package on infrastructure, which is now looking at those new corridors to have economic development opportunity in rural Florida, some key connections around our state, but also to serve as sort of bridges to escape the coast in times of hurricane, and no one understands how important that is better than the Panhandle. But that was a great success of last year. I think in infrastructure, this year we're seeing more of a focus on broadband connectivity, again, especially in opportunities for rural counties with a grant program. And it's worth, another place Florida should be bragging about itself is we are now looking at, I think, the 9th, possibly 10th year in a row where our legislature and governor will be ultimately supporting over $10 billion in our state DOT 5-year plan. Few states are investing in infrastructure to the degree Florida is. Granted, we need it because you heard me talk earlier about how fast we're growing, and I'm sure there's some days even across the Panhandle where it feels like as much as we're doing, it's not enough and it's not fast enough. But by way of a background, I'll tell you, I was in Louisiana for a national conference this summer that we do with all other state chambers. And my counterpart in Louisiana was sort of down in the dumps about their legislature. He said, David, we just can't get our legislature to invest in infrastructure. Our entire state budget was only $700 million. And I said, you gotta be kidding. That's not gonna get anything done. And he said, well, why? What did you guys do in Florida? And I said, Our legislature does $10 billion a year, and he literally couldn't get his head wrapped around $10 billion a year. So kudos to our legislature for what they're doing there. I'm probably going to run a little long, so I'll speed up here, Ken. I want to talk, so this next topic's super important, and some of you that know me, and if you don't, I'm like the proudest Floridian you'll ever meet. I'm 6th generation from Winter Haven, Florida. I love our state. I love bragging about our state. But there's one area we're not doing so well in, and we've got to do better at it, and that's our legal climate. So every 2 years, a national survey gets released, and it shows the ranking of all 50 states in terms of their legal climate. And Florida's been in the bottom 5 for the last 3 times that report has come out. So this kind of speaks to how often are you being sued? Is it a legitimate lawsuit, or is it a frivolous lawsuit? How much are you paying as business leaders just to make a ridiculous lawsuit go away because you really don't have the time to fight it and you'd rather just stay focused on running your business? We've literally been in the bottom 5 for 3 years in a row, and we've had some national organizations like ATRA call us out in their report and call us, quote, a judicial hellhole. I don't know about you, but that's not what I want our state to be known as. And so kudos to Governor DeSantis, who leaned in his first session and mentioned assignment of benefits reform and the fraud that was going on in homeowners insurance, mentioned it in his first State of the State speech. And thanks to that, and thanks to Doug Broxson, we were finally able to get that issue solved last year. And while I'm on Doug Broxson, what a hero. This guy has chaired banking and insurance in a very tough committee, in a lot of fights with the Florida trial bar, and he has stood toe-to-toe and fought them every step of the way. And because of that, he probably has a bright red target on his back. So no kidding, when you see him, you thank him for everything he's fighting for on behalf of the Florida Chamber, and I hope all local chambers as well. The news on this front isn't particularly good for another reason. There were 17 different legal reform bills filed this session. You'd have to go back to Governor Jeb Bush to find a time when there were more tort reform bills filed in the House and Senate at the beginning of session. But as we stand here today, it's pretty much in the ditch, meaning most of them have already been killed or they're stuck in a committee. There's 1 or 2 that might still have a pathway, but the forecast right there is a pretty bleak one for the next few weeks. So we're going to have to keep fighting. If you get a chance, contingency fee multiplier, if you can remember that's one tort reform bill that still has a pathway if we can get it out of Senate rules, and so you might speak up for that. On taxation and tax cuts, Chris mentioned the tax cut package. It's up again today in the Appropriations Committee in the House. In total, about $150 million worth of tax cuts. But I want to tell you about the 2 biggest pieces. The first one is the business rent tax. This is something the Florida Chamber and all local chambers across the state have worked on together. Remember, we're the only state that has this tax. We've been nibbling away at it, trying to ratchet it down over time. The House did include another teeny tiny bite, but they would, in total, it would bring it down about $30 million. A second is the communication services tax. I think everybody sitting in here has a phone, so we all pay this tax, right? They've included a $60 million decrease in the communication services tax. This is really important for a lot of reasons. One, it's one of the few areas where, even though we have one of the best tax climates in the country, we're actually the 12th highest in terms of the communication services tax. And so I'm glad they're looking at it. They've taken a baby step, and I hope they'll take some more steps in the future. I'll wrap up with maybe a scope of practice. Huge priority for the speaker, big priority for the Florida Chamber, very helpful for access and reduction of healthcare costs, particularly in rural Florida. So some of you are from counties that are, certainly would constitute part of rural Florida. If you hadn't heard this, listen to why this is important to rural Florida. Our state, if you took the 30 most rural counties, has 4.5% of Florida's population, but they only have 2% of our doctors. And so the ability for those nurses to practice at the full level of their ability becomes really, really important when it comes to access in those rural communities. And so we'll continue to work with the speaker and try to get the Senate warmed up for that. I'm over, Sarah, so I'm going to stop, but I'd love it if there were some questions, because I think that's far more interesting than me just rambling on in a monologue. Any questions? Seeing none.
Shout out to the chamber. Y'all do a good job. You give partners to the business community. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate you.
He's already ready to start talking, so we'll bring him right up here. Ken Lawson is the director, Secretary of Department of Economic Opportunity.
Keep a job. But I'm glad to be here. Hey,
He might brag just a little bit because he is a graduate of FSU.
Thank
and
you
they
very much.
Did have a big win last night over Louisville.
thank God. We're a basketball school. Thank you very much. Hey, folks, I am Ken Lawson. I'm one of the luckiest guys in Tallahassee. For the last 9 years, I've been involved with our economic development agencies. For 6 years, I ran the Department of Business Professional Regulation, where we made sure we cut stupid regulations that waste money and time for our businesses. Then for 2 years, I ran Visit Florida during the initial crisis with Richard Corcoran. We tried to cut marketing money for our state tourism marketing firm. Because you realize that tourism is the base of our economy, and if we're not marketing our state on a regular basis, we're missing out to competition across the country and the world. And since last year, I've been in charge of the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. And with Emily right there in the blue coat right there, I have 1,500 people who care about our state and working with our partners to make smart financial strategic investments in small, medium, and large communities across Florida. In fact, just last week I was with Governor DeSantis at the airport, and we were standing there, myself and Jamal Saul, the head of EFI, Enterprise Florida, announcing a job growth grant fund for the community to develop infrastructure, making sure we're using money to give to your community to help grow out infrastructure and jobs. I was at that same airport when the football team came back with Martha Saunders and won the national championship, and that was a proud day too. But bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that we're one community, and I'm one piece. And while I'm in a job at DPR, Visit Florida, DEO, I'm here to serve you. I just want to tell you what we're doing in my shop right now, be helpful, all right? This coming session that we're in right now, the biggest issue that we're facing is renewal of the Qualified Target Industry Tax Refund. Bottom line is this: in the state of Florida, the word incentive is a boogeyman. We don't believe in that. Just giving money to a company to come here, and there's no, how you doing, sir? There's no responsibility to make sure they provide the jobs or create the business they promise. But with QTI, to diversify our economy, we allow those companies who are job creators, who create jobs in aerospace, financial markets, other areas that are different and help our economy grow. Once they create the jobs, once they create the business and pay their taxes, they get a tax refund, all right? And that's just a benefit for being a risk taker. And if they overpay their taxes, the government should not hold on to their money. But this year, come June 30th, that tax refund is going to disappear, kind of like Visit Florida if it's not renewed, right? So I'm asking all my friends like you, when you see our members, explain how important the QTI tax refund is to help diversify our economy. Because our governor, when he stood in front of the Capitol back in January 2019 and talked about our economy, about tourism, agriculture being the base, but we got to diversify it. So if we have headwinds come, we stand strong, we protect ourselves. So that's very important for my agency and for the business community to stand up and share why it's important across the state, be very helpful. Next, that's important for us. When I came to this job back in January 2019, we have a piece in disaster recovery. As you know, DEM, after any hurricane like Michael or Irma, for short-term recovery, short-term mitigation, they receive money from FEMA. But for our agency, we receive money from HUD for long-term disaster recovery. And the process to receive those monies and put them on the street takes a while. So my number one priority is to make sure we build out the team to help our community. So since January 2019 to today, we built out the team from 5 people to 50. Then with the 3 programs with Irma, we put $300 million out of $900 million on the street in terms of awards. And then with Michael, where the federal government said, we promise to give you X amount, there's a process that has to be followed where they have a federal register, basically a guidebook on how to get the money. What we've done is that We've put people in the street to go across the panhandle to have round tables found. What's the best way we can deploy the money for long-term disaster recovery and work on our action plan? And then we have mitigation money, about $755 million, where we put in our action plan with the federal government. So when we get that cash across the state, we make sure we harden our state against another disaster. But every single day from day one I start on the job to the last day I leave, disaster recovery, ensuring that long-term recovery is focused upon, use money well, get on the street, and realize, we explain to our friends and neighbors, it takes time, but we're committed to following through to help people with infrastructure, workforce, and also repairing homes. So that's important to me. Then one thing that Dave said that's very important to us, the future of Florida, talent. When I came to this job back in January, I had the responsibility every month to stand on TV and say, hey, this month unemployment is X. In fact, this month unemployment is 3%, the lowest it's ever been. That means people are getting jobs, people are developing businesses, and they believe our economy. But at the same time, although it's statewide, how's it in each region? So over the course of this last year, I've had business roundtable discussions where I've talked to business leaders on the ground about what they're seeing and feeling. And what I've heard from these roundtables is this, is that we have low taxation, great regulations that we're cutting to waste, right? Getting rid of those stupid rules. But if I have an IT company and I'm talking to somebody about coming to Florida, a person who has the skills, knows what we have, may say, where's the sizzle? Isn't your brand just old people in tourism? They say that. But then they don't realize, like Dave said, #1 university system in the country, low taxation. So we recognize as an agency we have to spread the right message, spread the truth about who we are, why it's a benefit to come to Florida, to build a business, create a job, and build your future out. And from last session, in these efforts, what was created is a Talent Development Council, where you have the holy trinity of education, government, and the business community, looking at how we create the jobs and also the educational pathways for the future. So meeting last year, we developed a strategy, and meeting for another year or so, how we carry out the best practices to encourage not just apprenticeships, but create options for people to learn the skills necessary to break into the 21st century and build a life. So that's what it comes down to. When we talk about different laws, our economy, we're talking about human beings, communities, believing in our communities, investing in our communities, having a young person know they can get a job, have a house, have a future. And what we do collectively is what matters. So when you come to Tallahassee and you talk to people like me or legislators or even the governor himself, it's about explaining how can we best grow our community for the future and have a foundation that matters. And these activities and tactics we engage in develop into a full strategy that builds a grand strategy for a state that's competing against the world. So with that, that's who I am and what I do. And I appreciate what you do because of the Northwest Florida, you're the straw that stirs the drink of Florida. And I appreciate you. Any questions? Wonderful. Good morning. See you later.
I love it when Ken Lawson speaks. If you're not awake when he's done, there's no pulse. That's all I can say.
Y'all be good.
Thank you very much for being here. With that, we'll move right into our next speaker. Unfortunately, as is not uncommon in Tallahassee during session, things happen and pull people away that have to go and handle things for their real job. They can't come speak to groups. And Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, Carol Dover, was not able to do that because of things going on, obviously. But in my opinion, nothing against Carol, I now get to introduce probably one of my favorite people over here in Tallahassee. She and I go back, her previous position with Retail Federation, they used to host a fundraiser for my former boss when I was serving for Representative Clay Ford, and we spent many an hours in a fundraiser just chatting in the bottom floor of the Florida Retail Building. So with that, she's now General Counsel for Florida Restaurant Lodging Association, Samantha Padgett, and come and talk to us, please. Thank you so much.
Carol sends her regrets this morning, but I am very pleased that I get to join you, especially when I get to be introduced by a very good friend of mine. And I also, while it's challenging to come behind Ken Lawson because he is so dynamic, I do like it because everybody is always awake. And so it kind of puts a little bit of energy in the room. So hi, Todd, how are you? It's good to see you. It's always nice to see friends in a room. So I'm so pleased to be with you this morning, but I've been asked to talk about something that's a little bit of a heavier topic, and that's human trafficking in the state of Florida. And I really, what Ken said is very true. We're talking about communities and families and wanting to create the best possible environment in the state of Florida. And sort of this unfortunate underlying current are some of the challenges in our state. And what we've come to realize in the past few years is that there is unfortunately a large occurrence of human trafficking in the state of Florida. And it's happening in all of our communities, and it's happening in small towns and large towns and small hotels and large hotels. And from the perspective of the hospitality industry, we know that we have a role to play in eradicating this in our state. And in targeting this and preventing this and eradicating this, we only serve to make our community stronger and make the brand of our state stronger. So what we did in 2019 in partnership with a lot of different organizations was advocate for the adoption of mandatory human trafficking prevention training in all public lodging establishments in the state of Florida. And right now we're working directly with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation as they're passing the rules to talk about how that training requirement will be implemented in all of our different businesses. And it will require hands-on, a very comprehensive training for all of the employees that work in housekeeping and in the front desk that are most likely to have the opportunity to see some of this trafficking activity take place. We're giving them the ability to recognize this, to see the signs, and giving them the knowledge they need so they know how to report and how to follow up with that. And we think that this will only serve to make our facilities better, our establishments better, but more so our communities better and stronger. And it's interesting, right before I came over here today, I was working, communicating with a city that is also very concerned about this, and so concerned that they wanted to pass their own training requirement, their own signage requirement. And so I had to, unfortunately, do what I call the strongly worded letter and say, hey, wait, don't pass an additional requirement on your business. This is already happening, and this is already being embraced on a statewide basis. And we're very pleased to be what we consider to be a proactive part of this solution and working with victim advocate organizations and also law enforcement. In advance of the Super Bowl down in Miami, we were very pleased to play a very active role in a program down there to provide training to a lot of our different employees and service workers, but we also provided a perspective for what policy development looks like at the state level. We're really excited. Our regional director for this area, Nick Lowe, has just shared with me that we intend to offer a similar program in Northwest Florida on May 12th. So we're excited to be yet part of another wonderful program to educate, to engage in outreach, and to talk about how we can be proactive about eradicating human trafficking in the state of Florida. I would be remiss in my duties and representation of our industry if I didn't just raise your awareness as business owners about one issue that's on the forefront, and that is Amendment 2. And so I'm shifting gears here. Amendment 2 has been approved for the ballot for November 2020, and what that will do is raise Florida's minimum wage from its current level at $8.56 to $15 an hour by 2026. And from the restaurant industry, we've done a lot of studies and looks about what this will be, what this impact will be. But the impact is there for any business that pays minimum wage. And what we're seeing is, as we're talking about this with different members and in different communities, that there's a potential impact for all businesses, even if you don't pay minimum wage employees. It's what you pay for goods and services. It's how costs may increase in your community and for consumer goods and for services. And so I encourage you to talk to your membership on how they might be impacted if we see such a drastic increase in Florida's minimum wage by 2026. It is a 75% increase from the current level of minimum wage. So I encourage you to talk with your membership, look at that. It's Amendment 2. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak to the programming on May 12th?
I am going to have to defer to my friend Nick. I know that when we did the programming in Miami, we did offer several different organizations, including Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, have offered their own free training program. So I know one of the things that we did in South Florida was offer a very large opportunity for anybody who wanted to receive the training to go through the training as part of a group rather than have to do it individually. It's offered online. There were also panels that included law enforcement officers, public policy officers, and industry members talking about how they were working within their sector to partner with other organizations and working to eradicate human trafficking. So it's my understanding that will be similar programming in Northwest Florida. Thank you so much. Enjoy your time in Tallahassee, and thank you for all you do in your communities.
So the last couple of days, we've heard from politicians, we've heard from agencies. Now we're going to get to hear from the media about maybe what's really happening in session. Troy Kinsey is with Bay News 9 out of the Tampa Bay area, but he's been covering Tallahassee since 2006.
That's right.
2006. So he's seen a lot and knows that, sometimes you might hear some things, but that's not exactly what's happening. So we wanted to hear from him, get his perspective. And he's also, he does a mean Charlie Crist impersonation if you ever need someone for that purpose.
Republican, Democrat, does really matter? As long as you're a Floridian, you vote, that's all I care about. Remember him?
So, Troy Kinsey.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, so I do weddings, anniversaries, bar mitzvahs. You can book a Charlie Crist impersonator if you want. I'll give you my contact information. I also do a pretty good Rick Scott. And of course, now we have a new governor, Ron DeSantis. We have a show every year here in town called the Capitol Press Corps Skits. And it's held, traditionally it's been held the second week of the session, but we had to push it back about a month this year because of the early session. So they all attend, typically they all attend. Rick Scott boycotted us for about 5 or 6 years. And we lampoon them on stage, and then they follow up with rebuttal videos where they make fun of the press corps. So it's all in good fun, and we all raise money for journalism scholarships to produce more of me to hold the people over the Capitol accountable. So as Todd said, I've been doing this for about 15 years now. I cover the Capitol for Bay News 9 in Tampa and Channel 13 in Orlando. I've got, I would argue, the best job on the Capitol Press Corps because my bosses are 300 miles away. So I'm pretty much on autopilot, especially at this point in my career because I started when we had a lot of old guard members of the Florida legislature who had been in the process for about 20 or 30 years and who had not been subjected to term limits, which didn't really kick in until about 2008. If you recall, they passed in 98, and so it took about 8 to 10 years for term limits to really take hold here in Tallahassee. So we had folks like Al Lawson, who had been in the Florida legislature for about 25 years, Dennis Jones, who had been around for about that long, who knew how the process worked and would not be handcuffed by lobbyists who essentially are writing their bills. They knew better than that. The process has changed in a pretty fundamental way since then, in that you have a lot of new members now who get elected and don't know how the system works, and they come up here and don't even know how to file a bill. So what do? They call up Ron Book or Brian Ballard, who are two of the uber lobbyists in town, and they ask them to help walk them through the process. Well, these lobbyists obviously serve a master. They have many clients, and it's how they make their money. And so one of the little secrets that nobody talks about, at least in the public realm very often, is that lobbyists, most of them, will draft the language that will be then copied and pasted onto the bill that your local representative or state senator files. Didn't used to work that way. It used to be that the lawmakers themselves or their staffs would draft that language, but because of this rapid departure of experience and knowledge of the process, you've got the lobby corps in a much more powerful position than they were when I started about 15 years ago. On the flip side of that, you've got fewer members of the Capitol Press Corps who are holding these lobbyists and these politicians accountable. The Capitol Press Corps was about 3 times as large as it is now back when I started. So I remember one of my first gaggles, a gaggle is kind of an impromptu press conference with a public official, was with Jeb Bush in his final, he must have been in his final 8 months in office. And I couldn't get a word in. I mean, there were about 50 reporters, and he would only gaggle once every couple of weeks outside the cabinet room at the Capitol. So that was your only opportunity to grab this guy. There were about 50 reporters who comprised the Florida Capitol Press Corps gathered around him, and it was my second week on the job, and my bosses were demanding that I ask Jeb Bush, the governor, about the 25th anniversary of the space shuttle launch. Pretty easy question. Softball question, but I couldn't get it in because of the size of the Capitol Press Corps. So the gaggle wrapped up, and I asked my question as he was walking into the cabinet room, and he goes, "No, it's over. We're done. It's over. We just did it. It's done." Now the governor has plenty of time. You can call up his staff. We can do a one-on-one interview with Ron DeSantis this afternoon, assuming he's in town, which I don't think he is. But if he were in town, he would have the time for it, because we've only got about 15 to 20 full-time members of the press covering the legislative and not just the legislative, but the executive and judicial processes in the state capital of America's third largest state. So it really has been kind of disheartening to see the shrinkage of the press in Tallahassee over my time here. Most of that owes to the fact that newspapers now haven't figured out what a successful business model is. And so they've been either folding up shop or going into bankruptcy protection. The Miami Herald last week, if you've been following the news, declared bankruptcy, and so they are now owned by a hedge fund. The hedge fund managers have been pledging not to lay off any of the staff at the Herald, but I think a lot of the folks there see the writing on the wall. And we have a rather large bureau that's run by the Miami Herald here in town. They partner with the Tampa Bay Times. That partnership began back in 2008, right around the time the recession hit, and you began to see a lot of consolidation and layoffs in the media industry. So they've been piecing together a process whereby they can share staffs and cover stories that both outlets otherwise would not have been able to cover if not for this shared relationship. And that's been going on now for about 12 years. But it really has been difficult if you're a newspaper to avoid this changing media landscape. There is a new component on the Florida Capitol Press Corps, and that is digital media. We didn't have Politico back when I started. We have a pretty sizable political bureau. They've got a staff of about 5 or 6 people, and they cover not just politics, but niche issues as well. Education, the environment, criminal justice reform, and they've got reporters who are dedicated to these issues. And so I think that has been a big net plus in terms of the value of the coverage coming out of Tallahassee. It's one thing to go to a press conference or one thing to go to a legislative hearing on a bill and to cover that bill passing. It's quite another to be able to enterprise a story and to get ahead of the story before a bill is even filed here in town. Because many times, going back to the point I made about lobbyists running the show to a large extent, there are issues that if the public were more aware of, would preempt a bill from ever advancing in the process. And so it's important, I think, to have that kind of niche coverage, which Politico provides. We've got FloridaPolitics.com, which is run by a guy named Peter Schorsch, and I met him when he was working out of his mom's basement apartment. This was back in 2008 when I first met Peter, and he now runs a show where he doesn't just run the FloridaPolitics.com website, but he publishes Influence Magazine, which caters to the lobby, basically caters to the lobby corps here in town. So if you walk into a lobby office, you'll see an article praising whatever the firm is in Influence Magazine that they partly paid for. But so he's doing pretty well business-wise. So I don't think, I think he would readily admit that this is a project that's worked out for him very well in terms of the profit he's making off of this magazine. I'm amazed I didn't think of it first, to be honest with you. So he has a pretty extensive digital team covering the process as well. So as we've seen a lot of these traditional media outlets shrink in size, you've also seen the entry of new digital media, which I think has been a good thing for the process. Certainly it's a void that has to be filled, and it's good to have people like that on the Capitol Press Corps. And then you've got people like me, and I do TV. It's a bit of a different beat because I can't cover the granular details of every story, of every bill or issue in Tallahassee. because my bosses demand visuals. They want real people, and they want good, compelling B-roll. I know it sounds kind of petty, but it's what's necessary to put a story on the air. And there are a few of us on the Capitol Press Corps who do TV. There's myself, there's Mike Vasalinda. He covers the Capitol for 10 TV stations, including Where in your neck of the woods. And I believe he's, do we have anybody here from the Panama City or Destin area? Okay. I think he does WJHG in Panama City. I might be wrong about that. They actually air me, by the way, as well on WTVY, based in Dothan, which airs in that market, I'm told. The deal was about 10 years ago, my bosses in Tampa wanted to get the radar information from WCTV in Tallahassee for their, it's called Klystron 9. It's the world's most powerful TV news radar. And so to do that, they forged a relationship with WCTV in Tallahassee to get their radar data to supplement the data they got from, that they have in-house from Tampa. I think they have radar from Jacksonville and Gainesville. Anyway, all this contributes to Klystron 9, and in trade for that, they gave WCTV my stories. I don't know if that's a fair trade, to be honest with you. I think the data is much more, radar data is much more valuable than my stories. And one of the partner stations at the time was WTVY. So to this day, even though the partnership fell apart about 5 years ago and they no longer get this radar data, they're still airing me on WTVY.
They tried to Phillip recently, and the people, the communities north of I-10 lost it. And so they're back.
Oh, you're kidding me. Really? Wow, that's impressive. Good, good, good. Terrific. I think somebody mentioned that, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So they want, so apparently the communities north of I-10 want more coverage of Florida government, which is interesting because it's kind of cross-cutting in that regard. It's where the voter turnout is, right? Chipley and those areas up there, right? Defuniak, yeah, sure, yep, know it well. Matt Gaetz country. I was, matter of fact, and maybe we can talk more about this in a little bit, I just saw a new TV ad for Matt Gaetz's probable Democratic opponent, who is, I believe, an Air Force veteran, and it was a really well-produced ad. He's brought in Bill Ayers, not Bill Ayers, the terrorist from back in the 60s, but the guy who advised Bill de Blasio's mayoral campaign in New York City and was briefly the campaign manager of Charlie Crist's 2014 Democratic campaign for governor. He was campaign manager for about 2 weeks, and apparently Charlie's wife didn't get along with him and he was gone. But he produces a pretty mean TV ad, and I think the Democrats are going to spend a fair amount of money running this ad in your neck of the woods in a very Republican district, a deep red Republican district, trying to snatch that seat from Matt Gaetz. So that's going to be a really interesting race that I'm going to be watching. I don't cover the area, per se. I mean, I'm a Tampa, Orlando guy, but this is going to be a race that's high up on my radar as we enter campaign season. I can't think of the gentleman's name, but I guarantee you as the ad continues to run, he will become more or less a household name in your district and around the state. So that's a little bit about what I do. I'm going to stop talking because I talk all day anyway. I'm sure you've got questions. Hopefully you have questions. If you don't, that's fine too. But anybody have any questions about the process here in Tallahassee and about how the press corps has changed over time? Let me ask you this: any issues that you think we ought to be covering that you don't see enough coverage of for many of us?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future of print journalism at this point then? I mean, what is the successful business model? Is it dead and gone now?
I don't think the journalism is dead and gone. Yeah, right. Print journalism. Of course, print journalism. You know, if you're a print journalist, you could work for Politico. You could work for FloridaPolitics.com, for example, if you're covering this process. The issue has been that they can't find the advertisers like they did back in the old days to support the coverage, and concurrently, the subscription base has gone way down, particularly in Tampa Bay. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a photographer, longtime photographer for the Tampa Bay Times, and they had kind of a come to Jesus moment at a staff meeting about 2 months ago. And circulation, I believe, is below 100,000, which in Tampa Bay, for the Tampa Bay Times, which used to be the St. Petersburg Times, the mainstay of Florida newspapers, That's really kind of a startling development to see that the subscriber base has gone that low. And remember, this is a community with a lot of retirees who have not made the transition to iPads and tablets, and they still like to get their newspaper on their doorstep every day. And so that's troubling that you both have a departure of a lot of advertisements and subscribers. So I don't know what the answer is. The answer is not, in my opinion, paywalls, because it's been very clear. They've been trying this paywall strategy for a number of years now, and they just aren't getting the revenue from that. So I think you're going to have to go outside the box if you're a newspaper publisher, and figure out where you can derive revenue outside of people who are reading your content online. I think it's a very noble thing for readers to pony up whatever it is, $5 or $10 a month to read the content, but the vast majority of readers aren't going to do that. It's a continuing challenge, and it's been a challenge for about 20 years, going back to the .com bubble, when paywalls began to come into existence. So I don't have an answer for that, but I do know that reporters who have been covering the Capitol for a long time for a lot of these newspapers, the Tampa Bay Times, Orlando Sentinel, the New York Times newspaper group, they have about 5 or 6 newspapers around the state, have been able to find employment elsewhere. They've gone either to Peter's Shop, Florida Politics, or Politico, or have created their own kind of online outfits where basically it's more or less Twitter-based, and then they will link to their blog where they talk about an issue they're covering. But they've all been able to find employment, and that's heartening, because I think the publishers of the digital outlets value experience, value people who know the process, know the players, and know the issues. And so I'm quite heartened by that. But in terms of the newspapers, I just don't know. It looks to be a pretty untenable situation right now. And I say that as a newspaper connoisseur. I get the New York Times. I pay for the paywalls at the Miami Herald and the Tampa Bay Times. Mostly because I depend on their coverage as well. The little secret TV people won't tell you, but most of our stories begin in the print outlets, because they have the resources and they have the time to be able to cover, as I was mentioning, the granular details of these various issues, where we just don't. We have to feed the machine in TV news. So to a large extent, we kind of follow the leader. And that's another downside of this shrinkage in traditional media, that you're going to have ultimately less coverage in broadcast media as well of these very important issues. And it also means that we have to kind of pick up the slack as well and work a little bit harder on the broadcast media to do good journalism. Any big issues in your neck of the woods that you think aren't being covered? I ask every group that comes here that. No? Okay. Well, pleasure to be here, guys. Thank you for coming to Tallahassee. Absolutely.
Thank you, Troy. One thing I just want to say real quick before we break. Thank you, Sarah Lefevre's incredible job these last few days. Couldn't have done it without you. We've had some great conversations. I know it sounds like everybody I've talked to wants to do this again next year and expand it and bring more people into it. So I'm really excited about that. Thank you all for being a part of this. Really appreciate everything that y'all have done and brought to this.